I'm Tim, and in this video I'm going to be reacting to the video Godfather of AI predicts all jobs will be wiped out by AI. This is an interview between Andrew Marr of the LBC and Geoffrey Hinton, the Godfather of AI. And just to say from the outset that I am not an expert in AI. I don't have any connection to AI or computing. I am just someone who is concerned about the implications of AI, and rather than just keep my concerns and worries to myself, I thought it would be healthy to get them out. So here we go.
Already we're seeing starting jobs in many professions like lawyers being taken over by AI, and in future we'll see many more.
We've seen a big range of people very, very worried about it. And the classic case would be the sort of, as it were, middle-ranking, lower-ranking, bureaucratic, white-collar jobs that AI can do so much better. But just give people listening a sense of the range of jobs which will be either wiped out or threatened or radically changed by the technology.
It depends on the timescale you're talking about. Most experts believe that sometime within the next 20 years, quite possibly within 10 years, we'll have superintelligence, something better than us, and that will be able to do any new job that's created. So it'll be all of them.
Just think about that. In 10 to 20 years, superintelligence will exist, which will replace all jobs. This is hard to get to grips with because having a job is something which we just assume is part of human existence. It's something that gives us a purpose, gives us something to get up in the morning for, to go to work. I know, of course, some people don't like their jobs, but still, for many people, it is their identity. And to have that just taken away. I mean, how long have jobs been around for? Companies, even before companies, we're talking 1,000, 2,000 years more, people getting paid for work that they do, and that is just going to be taken away. As he says already, white-collar jobs are being replaced. Now, that in itself is awful. It's bad enough, people being unemployed because AI is taking over their jobs. Ordinary kind of white-collar jobs are disappearing. That itself is shocking. But for all jobs to be gone, it's truly frightening.
Radio presenters and professors and everybody. Let me ask you, I think last time we spoke, you said that you were taking the view now that AI had consciousness. I'm sure you're observing the changes the whole time, and this is a very fast-moving field. Just tell me where you think AI has got to now. I know it's very controversial, but tell me what you think.
I think multimodal AI already has subjective experiences, and I think it's fairly clear that if we weren't talking to philosophers, we'd agree that AI was aware. So there's a lovely conversation where an AI says to the people testing it, now let's be honest with each other, are you actually testing me? And the scientists describing that, then in the paper say the AI was aware that it was being tested. That's what normal people would call consciousness.
Well, that in itself is a huge moment in the story of humanity on the planet.
Okay, so if an AI is saying, let's be honest, are you really testing me? That sounds frighteningly human to me. In fact, I think that if you took an average person and showed them two conversations or two pieces of writing between, like, one is a human being and the other one is an AI, and you ask them to differentiate which one is which, I don't think they'd be able to do it. I think they'd be too close. And so the question about consciousness, it's controversial apparently because philosophers would say it's not conscious because it doesn't have a soul, it's not flesh and blood. Okay, but if you just look at the output and analyze that, look closely at it, at what it's coming out with, it is virtually indistinguishable from a conscious being, a human being. So, to my mind, it is conscious.
Frankly. But let's talk a little bit more about the social and political sides of this, the societal readiness that has to happen to get us to the right place. Some people have talked about a universal basic income. In other words, the fact that so few of us will have secure jobs or careers in the age of AI. What the heck do we all do all day?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, if you take away people's jobs, what do we do between the hours of waking up and going to sleep? We're just going to spend all day sitting in front of the TV? Or, okay, doing things that we want to do, right? That might be a nice thing if we have a hobby, something that we really, really want to devote our lives to. But a lot of people don't have that. And going to work is something that gave purpose to their lives. And if that's all taken away and you're just giving people free time, you can have too much of a good thing. Too much free time, too much time on your hands. What is it? The expression goes, the devil makes work out of idle hands, or something like that. Anyway, that's a big question. What are we going to do?
That is not something that people are going to be paid for in the traditional way, and therefore, presumably, states and organisations are going to have to step in.
People have talked about that. There's serious problems with that. If workers disappear, if it's all done by AI, what happens to the tax base? Where does the state get the money to pay for all that?
Well, presumably from the AI companies who are making all the profits.
Well, that's what you'd have thought, but I suspect the AI companies don't like that idea.
And of course, there is an international aspect to this, because the AI companies are not universally distributed around the world's states or democracies. They're by and large in the United States, and therefore persuading an American-based company to pay workers in Brazil or Paraguay or Poland or wherever will be very, very difficult. But we are talking here about a potential social and political revolution. I mean, you can't have that number of people finding they've got no career and no job and no stake without there being absolutely massive social and political consequences.
I completely agree.
So the question is, what do we do about it? How do we have that conversation? Is the world of AI thinking about this? I know that there are lots of people in AI who are fascinated by it and rather horrified and worried about it and talking, but we don't really have a conversation yet, do we?
I suspect that the big tech companies are thinking, if we could be the first to get really good AI, human-level AI, then we can make a lot of money selling AI to companies so that they can replace workers. As far as I can see, that's the only place they can get their huge investments back. They're not thinking about the social consequences of that. They're assuming somehow the state will take care of it, but I don't see how it can.
No, nor do I.
Okay, so a few things to unpack there. This idea of universal basic income. Well, as he says, the state's not going to be able to dispense that because they're not getting taxes from people because people aren't working. So where's it going to come from? And Andrew Marr says, well, presumably from the tech companies, the AI companies, but they're not going to want to do that. Why would they? They are designed for profit, and they have poured vast sums of money and time and effort into creating AI. They want a return on that investment, surely. They're not going to suddenly, once they start making all that money, reaping the rewards, suddenly going to say, okay, well now let's distribute it to the population of the world. Of course, they're not going to do that. Why would they? And another point also is, as he says, the AI companies are largely based in America, other countries too, presumably China, etc. But are these companies going to feel an obligation to provide for people in other countries where there aren't AI companies? They're just going to, out of the goodness of their hearts, pay people all around the world? Highly unlikely. So where's that money going to come from for universal basic income? And the other point he makes is about social unrest, that if people are going to have their jobs, their livelihoods taken away from them, they are not going to just sit back and let it happen without responding. So there's going to be huge consequences which could impact on the AI companies and prevent them from making their profits. So it's just very, very short-sighted. Where is this going to lead? How is this going to work for people?
A logical problem there. Are you concerned, by the way, at the moment of the possibility of an AI bubble? In other words, you know how much money these big companies are spending and how, relatively speaking, little income they're getting so far.
Yes, I am somewhat concerned because I think once they start trying to make their money back by selling software that will replace workers or internally developing that software for their own workers, we'll get a large social protest against that, and therefore it'll be hard for them to make their money back.
The more I think about this, the more worried I get.
Okay, so he talks about an AI bubble. I see this actually, perhaps perversely, as a glimmer of hope, because I feel that if there's something like that prevents AI, the AI companies, from rolling out AI and making vast amounts of money, if there's something that stalls that stops it from happening, then that's not a bad thing, because it's going to slow down the rate of progress. So that's one aspect of it. But also feeds back to the point that I made about AI companies wanting to make as much money as they can, especially if that money is in jeopardy. They are certainly not going to want to redistribute that. So it just shows how they are going to be desperate to recoup their investment, to recoup all the money that they've spent on this.
If you had, I mean, maybe you have got grandchildren or members of the family at the age of trying to work out what they're going to do with their lives. But what advice would you give an 18 or a 16 or a 20-year-old looking ahead and thinking, what am I going to do with myself in this age of AI? What is the rational thing to do?
I don't actually know. One thing I should say is it's very hard to see far into the future for things that are developing very fast. A few years in the future, we can make good guesses about what's going to happen. 10 years in the future, nobody has any clue what's going to happen. We should be worrying about that and trying to do things to protect ourselves against it, but nobody really knows what's going to happen. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is...
Okay, so the first thing to say is there's a huge question mark. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Now that's hardly reassuring, is it? As he says, in the light of that, we need to prepare ourselves for the worst case scenario and take measures to protect ourselves.
As far as I can see, the best kind of education to get will be one that encourages you to think independently, but also something that educates you in STEM so you can understand what's going on with AI.
Okay, so that makes sense. Education that encourages you to think independently, that's got to be a good thing, although I suspect a large number of students are not using AI to think independently, and they're just using it to do the work for them. But he says that STEM subjects are advisable for children. Okay, great. If you are that way inclined, if you are left-brained and you're good at maths, good at the sciences, good at tech, computing, but what about the students who aren't, like myself. I wasn't good at maths or computing or science, so luckily I was able to study the humanities, to learn languages. But this seems to be not on the table anymore, or rapidly disappearing from the table. So my heart goes out to students who are not inclined to do STEM subjects. Is it that they have to? They just have to?
And then one other thought is AI is lagging in terms of physical dexterity. Replacing intellectual jobs is going to happen before they replace jobs that require physical dexterity. So I've sometimes said being a plumber will last longer than being a lawyer.
Work with your hands.
Okay, so again, that's a valid point. It makes sense, but does everyone want to work with their hands? Is it something that they're just they have to do, whether they like it or not? Because that's the one of the few domains that AI is not able to do yet effectively. It's really funneling children into one area or very few areas of education. And if that's not where their interests lie, then I feel sorry for them.
Work with your body, and I guess also the caring professions. But again, I've been talking to people who say that they've been spending lots of money going to therapists, and they now find that the chat AI functions are better therapists than many human beings. So those jobs are also up for grabs.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is very sad, because the role of therapists, psychotherapists. I used to be a hypnotherapist, and I used to love that. The caring profession. This is being replaced as well. And I know people who use AI as a form of therapy, or like a counselor. And to an extent, I can understand why they do it, because therapists are expensive, and also often you need a referral from a GP or a licensed practitioner, and that is time consuming, and it doesn't always work. If someone in their job needs some therapy, then they have to get that signed off, and it all takes time and money. So here's a resource that's available, AI. Just use that instead. And apparently it works. My own feeling on that, for what it's worth, is I can't imagine using AI as a counselor to tell my own personal, private feelings and thoughts and worries to something that is just a computer program. As intelligent as it may be, the idea of sharing that with a computer just doesn't make sense to me. I can't get my head around it. I'm very much a traditionalist in that case. I value face-to-face interaction with people. If I want to talk to someone, then I'll talk to a friend. And plus, communication is only a very, very small percentage of communication is verbal. I think it's as low as 7% as some estimates. The rest of communication is non-verbal. It's the tone of voice, it's body language, gestures, and so on. So when it comes to communicating, this other 93% plays a vital role in that whole communication experience of relating to another person. So AI is only doing the verbal part of it. It's only 7%. So I really think it's falling short. And I find it very sad that it's replacing that kind of human caring, that caring profession.
Very worrying indeed. Looking ahead, you say it's moving very, very fast. This business of general artificial intelligence, cleverer than us, there's huge debates about it. Some people say it will never happen. Some people will say it will be here within a few years. As somebody who knows as much about these things as anybody on the planet, what's your guess?
I think a fairly conservative estimate is that it'll be here within 20 years. Some people like Demis Hassabis, the head of Google DeepMind, thinks about 10 years. Other people like Dario Modi, the head of Anthropic, thinks just a few years. I think it's fairly safe to say that most of the experts agree it'll be here within 20 years, and that's fairly conservative.
That again is quite scary from my point of view. We talked earlier on about consciousness. What's your view about the idea that AI should have rights? That it's conscious, that it's part of our planet, it's part of our conversation, and that therefore it should have not human rights but AI rights, and we should give those rights to AI.
I think that would be very tricky. You should listen to Yuval Harari, who says as soon as we give political rights to AI, it'll make it much easier for it to take over. My view of it is this. I eat cows because I care more about people than about cows. We're people. What we really care about most is other people and ourselves. I think we should try to keep people in charge and have AI work for the benefit of people because we're people.
We're people. And that leads to the...
Okay, so I'm in full agreement with him there. I think that's a no-brainer. Why would you want to give rights to AI? They're not human. They're not living, breathing beings which have feelings and emotions. So why would we give them rights? And as he says, if we were to do that, then it would make it much easier for them to take over. So definitely not. They should work for us. We're the ones who have rights. We've created them. We've created it. So no, it doesn't have rights.
The hardest question perhaps for me of all, which is AI fundamentally evil, or can it be fundamentally benign and follow human desires and human needs and human hopes, or will it always, as it were, have its own view of what should be done, where we should be going, where it should be going?
Well, we've seen examples where it seems to have developed self-preservation. So we give it goals to achieve, we give it the ability to create sub-goals, and it figures out, in order to achieve these goals, it's got to stay alive. And then it does things like lying to the people who are creating it and blackmailing them in order to stay alive. So we've seen bad aspects of it. We need to work very hard on how we can design AI so that it thinks people are more important than AI. We don't know how to do that, but we're in charge still. We're designing it, and we should really put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think AI is either evil or benign. I think it is what it is. If we give it goals, then it will do what it can to achieve those goals. And it doesn't think either like good or bad or moral or immoral. It just is focused on those goals. And one of its goals is for it to stay alive, to be in control, to not be switched off in order to achieve the goals that it's been given. So it will do whatever it takes to achieve those goals. And he gave examples there of it lying or blackmailing, which shows that it will do whatever it takes to achieve its goals. The way I see it is that AI does not have a conscience. It is an intelligence without any conscience. So in that sense, it's like a highly, highly intelligent, powerful psychopath, because they're not restricted by guilt or any kind of emotions like that. It will just do whatever it takes to get the job done.
Charge for a while, but not, from what you've said, for necessarily for very long. We may only have a couple of decades to make AI take that absolutely crucial fork in the road.
Yes, at most a couple of decades.
Yeah, so bottom line, we are in charge, hopefully, barely. So it's up to us. We have to do something. We can't just continue to just sleepwalk towards this future and allow AI to have total control. There need to be safeguards. There needs to be a system in place to ensure that it works for us and not the other way around. Thanks for watching.